Hi everyone, I'm Marie, Uplifters founder and CEO, and I'm very happy to be here with you tonight with Victoria Han from FAIR Foundation. So a little bit of introduction. So Uplifters is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering domestic workers and underprivileged communities with online education and peer support. And what we do is a free online money management and personal development program. And to sign up, you just need to click on send message on our Facebook page. So we are very happy to be here with you tonight. This is the 10th episode of our antivirus Facebook Live series. And we know that these are very challenging times for all of us, especially our community of domestic workers. So we have two objectives with this Facebook Live. First, to reply to your questions if we can, and if we cannot, just collect them and consult with professionals afterwards. We can go back to you later on. And second objective is that we are first and foremost a community, and this is super important for us to be here with you. And we really want to go through these difficult times with you. So yes, as I said, I'm very happy to be with Victoria tonight. So Victoria is a communications manager of Fair Employment Foundation in Hong Kong. And the mission of Fair Employment Foundation is to build market solutions to end the forced labor of migrant workers across Asia. And so one of its initiatives is a non-profit employment agency. The name is Fair Employment Agency, and it is recognized as a standard for ethical and professional practices for all employment agencies, transparent and trustworthy and fair for both employees and employers. So highly recommended as a domestic worker. If you go to Fair, you won't be charged any fee. Yeah, so hi, Victoria.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Yes. With pleasure. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and when you joined FAIR and your background with the domestic workers community?
Sure, yes. So now I'm coming up to about 3 years at Fair Employment Foundation. And my role as communications manager, I help our nonprofit businesses with their communications and marketing to employers and workers. And as you mentioned, Fair Employment Agency is one of our is a nonprofit agency in Hong Kong. And what makes us different is that we are a nonprofit and we never charge fees to workers. And why we do this is that by not charging workers, we make it fair for both employers and workers to find good matches and to find a good solution for their homes. So, and I've been there for about 3 years. And before that, I actually also worked at an NGO called Enrich, where they provided financial education for domestic workers in Hong Kong as well. Yeah.
So we are very lucky to have somebody who knows so much about the challenges faced by domestic workers and who has been active in great NGOs here in Hong Kong. So thank you again, Victoria. For all of us watching us tonight, don't hesitate to ask your questions. We are very lucky to have Victoria with an expert in all the questions regarding employment and contracts, especially in these difficult times. So let's say hi. So we have Jeneline here with us. So Jeneline is actually watching from Singapore. So thank you very much. A few questions will be related to the Philippines, so maybe also of interest to you. We have Laurie Gallos. Yes, good evening as well. And Gilance, good evening. And as I always say, you can call me Marie. And Alice. So good evening, Alice, as well.
It's great to see everyone commenting.
Yeah, we really enjoy the comments. To show the comments, don't hesitate to comment. We will be very happy to show it on the screen.
Yeah.
So as I said, this live will be mainly relevant for the domestic workers in Hong Kong, But we will try to provide updated information for domestic workers elsewhere in Asia. And we also will have information about the situations in the Philippines that will be relevant to all the Filipinas here. So the first question we had for Victoria is about the COVID-19 and the impacts and the challenges that you have seen them facing through your work at FAIR, and what FAIR has been doing to specifically help them address these challenges.
Yeah, I think this time and the pandemic has really affected domestic workers in very many ways. Workload is quite different because there's an emphasis on hygiene and cleanliness at home. People like employers and children in the home are staying indoors, not going to the office, or children not going to school. And so that has changed just the work dynamic for a lot of domestic workers. But also, more specifically at FAIR, as an employment agency, what we've been seeing are the challenges in workers who are changing jobs and their employment situations. And mainly those employment challenges are to do with the way hiring processes are changing with the COVID-19 measures coming into place. So COVID-19 measures can be like travel bans or government agencies and government offices being closed, or the services being suspended. And that means that hiring and submitting new contracts and things like that have been affected, and that is affecting domestic workers who are changing jobs.
We have seen as well the community being quite impacted. And can you tell us a little bit more about so we have seen a lot of new articles and resources published by FAIR. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So we've at FAIR Agency, we have a little a blog where we try to keep workers and employers updated about the current situation. So most recently, there have been quite a few changes at the Polo office in Hong Kong, so the Philippine Overseas Labor Office in Hong Kong, where they have changed some of their services. So this affected workers who are changing employers and also renewing contracts. So at the moment, currently, if you're renewing a contract, you don't need to go get it notarized at the Polo office, but you go directly to the Hong Kong immigration to renew your contract with the same employer. But later that would mean maybe that you would have to go through a different notarization process and to be, keep updated with the Polo office on how the situation changes. And then and for workers who are changing employers, the biggest change has been that all workers changing employers will need to use an agency. And in Hong Kong, previously or normally, those who are finishing contracts or those whose employers are relocating or have some financial difficulties, those special cases, those workers did not need to go through an agency and could process themselves with new employers. But with the service changes at the Polo office, right now, workers will need to go through an agency, and employers will need to use an agency service to process all the paperwork. So that's happened. That was a big change. That means a lot more workers who hadn't planned to use an agency will have to use an agency, and that's the same for employers. And then another big impact has been the travel situation between the Philippines and Hong Kong. With the global pandemic, flight situations have been changing very quickly. There's very limited flights. Even locally in the Philippines, there's not very much travel. Things are changing every day, but travel has been affected greatly. And then specifically with the Philippines, there has been very many cases in the Philippines as well with coronavirus, and the country has taken a lot of measures that differ from place to place in the Philippines, meaning that each place has different restrictions, and people are required to stay at home, offices are not returning to work, and transportation is not working. And the most recent news from that is that slowly some areas are lifting restrictions. Selected industries are returning to work, but it will be still quite a gradual process, I'm sure, as the officials are taking considerations for public health and safety. But what this means for workers who have to go back to their country, to go back to the Philippines to process, it means that the processing time is quite slow. They may be quite delayed to return to Hong Kong to their new employer. And that may, this requires like very good communication with their employers, and understanding that they may not be able to report to work at the time that they wanted to.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm going to ask you, I think, questions where you can reply in more details, but that's a great overview. Thank you so much. Let me just show. So this is Fair Agency Facebook page and phone number. So this is a page that you can already like. So like this, you will get all the updates that Victoria is mentioning. And updated information, because as Victoria said, the situation keeps changing. So we are sharing as well on our Facebook group, but Facebook, if you want to get the information, it's better to like everywhere. So note it down, and I will show it again later on. Let me look at the comments, and for everyone watching, don't hesitate to ask your question. We are really, really lucky to have Victoria with us. So she's here to reply to questions related to employment in Hong Kong. So we have Yassi, we saying hi, and Eliane as well. Good evening. Yesha is saying good evening. And well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, but good evening. Maria Guzman, let's say. Yes, so going back to the different questions, and Victoria has already replied, but let's go again through the different impact for the domestic workers. So, well, sorry, one by one. Yeah, no, this is the first one, excuse me. Yeah. So the first one I wanted to ask you tonight, Victoria, is what is the thing that domestic workers need really to know about changing employers right now in Hong Kong?
Yeah. So the first point here is something that should be considered for any time you're looking for a new employer or you're applying for new jobs, is that if you are using an agency, to make sure that it is an agency that you can trust, that your employer can trust as well, and that you're not being charged fees that are illegal. So in Hong Kong, it is legal for agencies to charge a maximum of 10% of your first month's salary. So if your salary is 4,620, which is the minimum at the moment, then your employment agency should only charge you about $460. So they should not be charging you more than 10% of your first month's salary. And you should not be asked for your passport. You should be able to, you should be able to have access to your passport. They're not allowed to hold on to it. And they should be able to explain to you any documents that you're signing. So if you have any questions about any documents that they're asking you to sign, your agency is asking you to sign, they need to explain that to you, and you don't need to feel forced or pressured into signing things you don't know. So that is the first point, using an agency that you trust. And specifically right now in Hong Kong, all workers are required to use an agency regardless of their contract status. So even if you finish the contract, or if you're changing employers because your current employer is relocating, you still have to use an agency. So that is one thing to know about. And then keep in mind right now the current situation in the Philippines and travel situations. It is quite like things are changing all the time, and there are several delays, unlike before coronavirus. There's quarantine measures in Hong Kong and in the Philippines. So be aware of the delays that might happen throughout the process when you are trying to change employers. And that might be a consideration if you are thinking about breaking your contract. If it is possible to continue to work in your current contract, may be a good idea if you can, just because of the challenges in this situation. And then especially if you break contract, you will normally workers with broken contract will need to go back to the Philippines to process, and this may be a challenge that the potential employers may not see as a desirable thing. They will prefer workers who can process locally, and those workers would be those who are finishing contract or have special cases where their current employer is relocating and things like that. So those are kind of the two things. Using an agency that you trust. You should not be overcharged. You need to know your rights when you're applying for a job. And then the current situation means that there are quite a few delays and a few changes. And so, like I mentioned, but if you want to keep track of those, you can keep track of them on the Fair Agency Facebook, but also by following the Philippine Overseas Labor Office Facebook as well in Hong Kong, or the consulate Facebook in Hong Kong as well.
Well, thanks a lot for this great advice. And yes, it's good to remember, to remind everyone that these are special times, and if you can bear it, maybe it's better to stay with your current employer rather than risking losing your job just for changing. And we are with somebody from Fairpoint Foundation, Victoria, but well, you could believe that agencies, they are also not making a lot of business these days. So this is really trustworthy advice, just in your best interest. Try to stay with your employer if you can. This is really something you need to remember. Let me look at the next questions. So a very important point we get several times is about domestic workers who cannot leave their home and they still want to come apply because, of course, you may be in a situation where you don't want to renew, and that's completely understandable. Or your contract is finished, so you can also transfer. So then how can they apply for new jobs?
Yeah, so with the current situation, we have seen that some workers prefer to stay home during their day off because they're worried about the virus. But we also see some employers really have asked workers to stay home, and we recognize that. And so first thing to mention here is that all domestic workers are entitled to 24 hours day off, a 24 hours rest day. So
in Hong Kong, yes.
yeah,
Again, I'm emphasizing for everyone here. Yes, in Hong Kong, 24-hour rest.
Yes, in Hong Kong, and you know, it is in your right to spend that outside of your employer's home, and we understand that this is your rest day, and you want to use it for other errands and your meeting your friends. So this is a challenge that we see, and here we have been also asking employers to keep that in mind, and to be considerate of their workers' time. And workers can also help the situation by communicating with their employers, maybe telling them what health, safety measures they take, like they will always wear a mask, or you're not going to crowded places, and you'll be limiting your meetup with a few friends rather than a big crowd. Things like that can help in the situation. And so but if it is quite difficult to come out and go to an agency to apply, of course, again, so I work with Fair Agency, so I will mention Fair Agency's process is we've started this offering of having workers apply online first, and doing video calls with workers. So they are able to fill up a form on our website to apply, and then arrange for a video call with our staff to have a one-on-one chat with our staff. And then we begin the application process that way, instead of our normal practice of asking workers to come into our office so we can have a chat with an interview with our staff. So that's one way. If you are unable to come in to apply, you're able to apply online. I think in Hong Kong, there is another agency called Arrows that has done a similar thing where video call chats is available, and they also don't charge fees to workers. So we continue to be careful about people you're talking to online, especially on Facebook groups. When you're looking for jobs, there is very easy for someone to have a profile. So make sure you just go through and really check who you're talking to, and if there's a website that's connected and things like that before you do apply online.
Thank you for the reminder. It's indeed very important to check that you are talking to a real agency, licensed one, and not to random people. We have a few questions. So the first one about in case I want to change employer after finishing my contract, do I need to go through the same process like before, like taking trainings in the Philippines again?
Thank you for the question, Maria Agustin. So if you're finishing a contract, you fulfilled the whole 2-year contract, then you can actually process locally in Hong Kong, and that means you can take your home leave. So with each new contract, you have to take a home leave, but you can choose to defer it. So if you're finishing a contract, you don't need to go back to the Philippines necessarily right away. You can take your home leave later, and that might be a good idea considering the travel situation right now. You can ask immigration to defer your home leave and take it on another time. And then for training is something you only need to do once. You take training and you receive your NC2 domestic work training certificate. And then once you have that, you really don't need to retake training. And this is very important to know because unfortunately, there's a lot of times where training is very, very expensive. And, agencies may ask you to take it again or things like that. But if you have a valid certificate, NC2 certificate, you can use that and you don't need to go through training. And then again, in the Philippines, there is a law that says domestic workers are not allowed to be charged by agencies. Also, no placement fee. So you should not be paying those kind of fees.
Right. Thank you. Another question from Joanne. Joanne is asking if the employment contract will, if the employment ends on August, when is the time to look for another employer? Is it good to look now or just 1 month before the contract ends?
Yeah, that's a good question. For those finishing contracts, we generally advise workers to look for employers 2 to 3 months before the contract end date. So August should be
Around
June.
June?
Yeah, May, June. Yeah, 2 to 3 months. If it's too early, it will be too early for employers. Employers may not have started thinking forward to August yet. But 2 to 3 months will give you a good amount of time to start putting your application out, start looking for any recommendation from employers, and then have interviews and kind of understand what you are looking for and find the employer and job that you would like to take. So 2 to 3 months is a good time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Mary, Gustin, and Joanne, for your questions. I'm sure it's not only helpful for you, but for many people here.
Yeah, please keep the questions coming.
Yeah. Okay. Let's continue. We had other questions to ask you, Victoria, and one of them is so I think you mentioned it before, but how can the domestic workers extend the stay in Hong Kong if they are ending their contract? It's quite an important question. So I'm asking again for the people who are just joining us now.
Sure, yes. So extending stay in Hong Kong. So there's 2 different types of extension of stay. So if you are about, coming to the end of your current contract, and the current situation is not great to go back to the Philippines yet, and it's not great to look for an employer yet, then you may consider extending your contract with your current employer and stay working with your employer right now for 3 more months. So immigration is providing some flexibility for the workers and employers who want to do this. So you go to Hong Kong immigration and explain to the officer about extending the visa and current contract, and there is a visa fee of 230 Hong Kong dollars. So that's one way. Or if you are a worker who has ended their contract already, maybe you broke your contract or you terminated your contract was terminated, then normally in Hong Kong, workers are only given about 2 weeks to stay in Hong Kong. But considering the situation, if you can explain, writing a letter to explain to immigration, and also showing maybe if your flight was canceled or there's no available flights to your home place, then you can explain to the immigration officer that you need to extend your stay in Hong Kong, and it is up to the officer's discretion. So the officer will decide how long your extension of stay can be, but we have seen it be extended to 4 weeks. So that is good. One thing to keep in mind in the situation as well is that if you're not under contract, you may be looking for, you will need to stay in a shelter or boarding house during your time while you're still in Hong Kong. And so there's additional expenses with that. So just keeping those in mind is important.
Wow, that's very good to know. And so I guess the Fair Agency has been supporting domestic workers maybe in the process, or do you have some stories to share?
So we have for those workers who we've placed and who have needed boarding and accommodation while they're in between contracts or they've ended their contracts. It is actually the responsibility of the agency at that point to make sure the worker has accommodation and all of this. So we definitely have our own boarding house, and we opened that for our own workers. For other workers, there is also the OWA that can provide support. So the OWA is Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, and they're with the Philippine Consulate office. So if you need of support while your contract is ended, you can approach them for support and advice as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's good to know. We have a few more people saying hello, including Annie from Sri Lanka. So hi. That's very nice to be with us tonight. Yeah. And actually Nirosha from Sri Lanka as well.
Yes.
And we have Lenin as well saying hello.
Yes. Hi, Len. We used to work together at Enrich, so it's good to see you here.
Well, it's nice to see that the community is so strong and just willing to say hi, and we really appreciate it. Don't hesitate if you have more questions for Victoria. I have a few more on my side, but this is also for you an opportunity to ask your questions and get immediate answers. So please go ahead, and if you ask questions after the end of the live, I will make sure to transfer them to Victoria and try to reply to you later on. So we also had quite a lot of questions related to the quarantine, and especially in the Philippines when domestic workers return to the Philippines, because we have a big community of Filipinas at Uplifters.
So in the Philippines, there a few weeks ago or a week or so ago, there was a requirement for returning OFWs, overseas Filipino workers, to go into quarantine, but this has been amended. So a few days ago, it was there was a requirement for OFWs to go into 14-day quarantine, but this has been amended, and the OWA office in the Philippines has also set up a Facebook page for their quarantine operations. So if you're planning to travel back to the Philippines, it might be good to follow that page and look at that page for advice on what will happen.
What is that page? Sorry, I'm going to try to show it on the screen.
Sure, it's OWA quarantine operations.
Okay.
OWWA quarantine operations.
Okay.
So that, yeah, that might be a good place for you to check on what happens with the quarantine requirements there. But the most recent change for the procedure for arriving OFWs is that at the airport they will take a swab test, and then the test results will need to be come out first. So the test results will take a few days actually. So it says it will take about 3 to 5 days. So the worker, when they arrive in the airport, they will take a swab test, wait 3 to 5 days. They will be provided accommodation and assistance by OWA. And then once that test comes out and it is negative, workers will be allowed to go home. Otherwise, there will be, I think there's further quarantine or further treatment of that will happen. And then, so it is at least a 3 to 5 process once you arrive at the airport in the Philippines. And then another thing to keep in mind right now, because different regions have different restrictions on local transportation, and public transportation is not, it may not be running, it might be suspended. So trying to plan ahead and make sure that there is transportation for you, it will be important.
Well, thank you for reminding us as well about just local transportation. These kind of things can be very tricky if you don't plan in advance. We had stories from our community. I mean, it's the case in the Philippines, but it's also the case in Indonesia. And she had quite a lot of trouble after landing in Jakarta. So it's always good to check first. We have a few more comments. So Joyce is saying hi. Hi, Joyce, and please call me Marie. And we have a question from Shane asking Victoria, how about the visa? How long is it valid?
So on your visa, it should be there should be a visa expiry date on your visa. So I think Shane, what your question is that you already applied for a job and you signed the contract, but I think what's happening is that you are back in the Philippines to wait for the visa processing to happen. So you probably have a entry visa for Hong Kong, and this is valid for a few months and then it expires. So check the expiry date on your visa. Yes, right now still in the Philippines. So this means that this is your entry visa. This is what you need to enter immigration once you arrive in Hong Kong airport. So there is an expiry date on this, and if it is expired before you return, your agency will need to reapply for you in Hong Kong. And so this may take another few days. We have a guide on this, on this process and what things might expire and need to be renewed because of the delays for processing. So check your visa document, ask your agency how long your entry visa is valid for, and if they need to renew it, they will need to talk to your employer as well, and they will need to pay for another visa fee to Hong Kong immigration of $230 to do that. So I would check with your agency and check with your employer on your Hong Kong entry visa. Another thing that might be expiring for some workers if they've been waiting for a long time is their medical exam. So all Filipino overseas workers or overseas domestic workers will need to undergo a medical exam before they leave the Philippines and acquire a fit to work certificate. And this is only done by the government accredited clinics. And this is also only has a validity of a few months. So if it is expiring, this will need to be redone as well. The problem here is that I think the clinics and things related to recruitment there are plans to move forward, but currently what we're hearing is that a lot of clinics are still closed and the staff is finding it difficult to come back to work. So if that is expiring, you will need to retake the exam. It may still take time for those clinics to reopen, and so check with your agency, make sure that they are on top of renewing things for you if they're expiring, and they will be able to book things for you as they need. Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. The Fair Employment Foundation also has a training centers in the Philippines, right?
Yes. So the training centers in the Philippines right now, along with all the schools, are not able to return to operations. So our Fair Training Center is another one of our Fair Foundation's initiatives, and is a nonprofit training center, and we provide training for first-timer workers, first-timer domestic workers, and it is an accredited training center for NC2 domestic work. And so if you're planning to work abroad, keep Fair Training Center in mind. Currently, all workers are able to take our training for free, and so and get there, and then get testing for the certificate. But currently, right now, training centers are also closed. They're not able to operate at the moment. Yeah.
Well, at least thanks a lot for letting us know about this center, and it's another great organizations to follow, especially for the first timer. So you can let your friends know in the Philippines. This is a great place to go if you want to apply as a domestic worker.
Yeah.
We have one more comment. So Shane is saying, thank you very much. And we had also, thank you from Mary Augustin. And I think I've missed somebody. Yes, hi, Volagdan. I didn't say hi before. So thank you for being with us tonight. We had one more questions before, two more questions before we end, but don't hesitate to ask still your questions, and we will try to reply. So the questions we had was related to quarantine, but in Hong Kong this time. And so what happened to domestic workers when they arrive in Hong Kong?
Yes, so the quarantine requirement for travelers to Hong Kong, at the moment, I think it is still Hong Kong residents can enter Hong Kong only. But don't worry, it also includes domestic workers. So domestic workers with a valid work visa are still able to enter Hong Kong. But then there is a quarantine requirement in Hong Kong right now. And what happens is once you arrive in Hong Kong airport, just be prepared for a quite long process, as you will be asked to, take some swab tests, and also fill out some health declaration forms, and there will be some process where they will ask and explain to you how to do home quarantine. So all arrivals will need to do home quarantine for 14 days when you arrive in Hong Kong. And that means that for domestic workers, they will need to quarantine at the home of their employer, because that is where your work visa and your contract is dating where you will be. So you will be quarantining at your employer's home. So this will be the first choice that the government or the health officials will want you to quarantine in. But in some cases, employers preference or perhaps someone in the employer's home is not very healthy, or and so they need to be extra careful and need the worker to quarantine somewhere else outside of the home. In that situation, the employer needs to make a request to the health department specifically, and then also find a facility, a hotel where the worker can be quarantined. But there are some additional arrangements that the employer will need to do, because if the worker is being quarantined in a hotel, then somebody will need to, deliver food and supplies to the hotel. So we've been sharing information to employers if this is what to expect, and so this is something you can know as well. But generally, the first choice would be the workers coming in will quarantine for 14 days in the employer's home, and this means you are not allowed to leave the employer's home, and there will be some temperature checks and symptom check, like forms that you'll be provided with, and you can just take note of that every day. And then just keeping some distance between other household members during this time is also important as well. So it will be quite a different situation for those who are returning to Hong Kong for new employers, but it's not the same as before, where you just come back to Hong Kong and start working right away. You will need to stay home, and there maybe there's arrangements with your employers where you can do other tasks within the home, but you won't be able to leave the home for 14 days for the quarantine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very clear. Just to make things very clear, even if your employer doesn't want you to work because they are afraid they may you may spread the disease or something like that, you're still entitled to your salary, right? For these first 15 days.
Yes. So we have this question a lot. What happens to a worker's salary if the worker is unable to report to work or perform their duties? This largely is talking about workers who might be stuck in the Philippines and unable to return to work. During this time, unfortunately, there's no black and white answer, and it's really up to the mutual understanding of employers and workers on if there's some reduction in the salary or anything like that. So in this situation, we would really recommend workers and employers to reach out to their agency and reach out to the Labor Department hotline and ask about what they should do in their terms of arrangement right now. We emphasize that to employers that is an opportunity to build a good working relationship by showing understanding and consideration for their worker. And then for workers, help your employer understand where you're coming from, and the salary is going towards supporting your expenses and your family members, so you can have a professional and open discussion about this, so you can build a good working relationship.
Well, thanks a lot for the precisions. So we have Mary Augustin, who was asking about was actually reacting to the training center being free, and being very happy about this great news for domestic workers coming for the first time in Hong Kong. sharing how much she spent. Yes. So in Hong Kong dollars, 7,000 to 8,000 Hong Kong dollar before she got the job, and then paid also the 10% of her first salary. So yes, indeed, these are a lot of fees for the first timers here in Hong Kong, and we are indeed very lucky that there are such organizations at FAIR to make migration more ethical for all migrant workers.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, Fair Training Center is a nonprofit training center, and we're able to provide training for free at the moment because we are being supported by donors and supporters. So if you have friends who are considering going abroad to Hong Kong or other destinations for domestic work, we are able to provide training. So keep following fairtrainings.org or the Facebook page as well. It is available for free. Just keep in mind that there are a lot of fees that may be hidden. If you don't feel comfortable with the fees, please ask and please kind of push because in the Philippines there is a law that requires agencies to not charge placement fees to workers, for example, if you are going through Fair Employment Agency, our partner agency does not charge workers any fees, and for medical exams, we reimburse Fair Agency workers for the medical exam when they come back to Hong Kong. If they'll bring the receipt for their basic medical exam. So just be aware of the fees that you're paying for, and you should really not be paying more than 10% of your first month's salary, if that is the maximum agency fee that you should be charged. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all these important reminders. My last question before we end is, as an expert of the challenges faced by the domestic workers, your work at Enrich before and now at FAIR, what is your general advice for the domestic workers to make the migration successful?
That's a very big question. I would say the biggest thing I learned from working with migrant domestic workers and also considering like the financial challenges and that a lot of workers go through is to really understand your plan and goal for going to work abroad, understand which financial goal you're saving up for. Are you saving up for your children's studies, or are you saving up for a home? Make sure that that is clear before you come, and then you also understand how you will budget your money to be able to do that. So definitely take uplifters courses, and then be aware. Don't be afraid to ask questions throughout your migration. So when you're working with agencies, try to look up information, look up not just from your friends, but look at good information sources. So your uplifters, you can definitely look at a lot of resources here. You can look at for Hong Kong, you can look at the Fair Agency website and Facebook, but also just even through OA's Facebook pages and
information. Don't trust somebody just because she's your friend, and that will make a big difference in making better life choices. Thank you so much, Victoria, for your time. And before we end our broadcast, we usually do our evening ritual together with our guests. So this is a ritual we do every day with our students in our online course, Dare to Dream. And it's about sharing 3 things that made you happy today. Do you want to go ahead and share with us 3 things that made you happy today?
of all, thank you so much for having me. I will have to say, I hope this is not cheating, but the first thing is, having this conversation and being able to answer some questions from the community is definitely something that makes me happy. Second thing is having dinner with my husband, just as able to, that's simple things. And also happy to be able to today's a Tuesday, so just happy to be at the office and do my work with my colleagues. So that's a good moment.
Yeah, I guess we're all grateful to go back to the office.
It's the small
things. We enjoy our jobs, right? Well, and thank you so much for sharing with us. And I will share mine as well now. So I woke up this morning and I had a beautiful message, WhatsApp message from one of our alumni telling me that Uplifters made a big difference in her life, and that she had difficulties just to smile for a long time because she had trouble with her employer. And our online course really helped her not only with her finances, but really with mental well-being. So that's something that, of course, makes me very happy to read.
Wonderful.
Yeah, especially at 5:30 in the morning when my children are waking me up.
Timing.
And the second one is a great phone call with a friend in Singapore, and being able to support each other and getting news from her. There's still a circuit breaker in Singapore, so it's more challenging for everyone there. And the last one, I guess, Victoria, is just like you. I was very happy to be with you tonight and reply to the questions of our community. And I haven't done a Facebook Live for a long time, so it's really nice to be back online. Well, I think that's it for today. We have a last comment I'm going to show from Mary Augustine. Thanks for the smile on your face. It is a tiredness we felt. Well, thank you so much for this beautiful comment as well. It's very nice. Well, thank you again, Victoria. We have covered a lot, and I've asked you questions you had already replied before, just to make sure that everyone would get the comprehensive answers. So we are very lucky and grateful for your time and patience. And yes, for everyone listening to us, if you have more questions after we end the show, we will try to make sure to reply later on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Well, have a good evening, everybody, and see you soon. Bye-bye.